The most challenging kind of goes along some of the same cultural lines is just feeling often that you're just reduced to being a child a lot of the time. When I got to Mauritania, and I've heard this from most volunteers I've ever spoken to, you just feel like such an idiot all the time, and most people think that you're such an idiot all the time because there's little things like they say you don't wash your clothes right, you don't know how to cut the vegetable in your hand. It's like, you want me to cut an onion in my hand? You want me to wash my clothes so it makes this particular squeaking noise? You don't know where anything is, you don't know the language, you sound and act to them like a toddler would. I know in a lot of ways you lose a lot of independence. I've always been a pretty kind of strong, independent woman, and going to the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, I very much had to adjust to what my role was as a woman and what I could do, and when the right time to kind of stand up for myself was, and when it was time to just kind of step back and respect the cultural norms. So that feeling at the end of a day of just utter helplessness of you can't communicate, you're not doing things right, that's definitely frustrating when you're used to kind of living on your own. But you do overcome it. And I guess the most rewarding for me would be just getting to be a part of I lived with a host family my entire time, which differs based on the community, and getting to be really a part of that family where I was just considered one of their other children was very rewarding. I think for me, most of the rewards were that kind of social relationship that you build and really getting to understand people who are so different. I would say if you're thinking to go into the Peace Corps, that you're going to make this strong, measurable difference, that after 2 years you'll be able to say, I did this and look at all this professional work I've accomplished, you might want to reconsider your motivations for joining. I had one moment in my class where my students I think I taught them some kind of literacy skills and a little bit of English, but it was a difficult situation to expect a lot of progress. And at one point, some students were talking in this class, and when you have 56 students, when a few start talking, just utter chaos erupts. And I stepped over and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And the boy looked up and said to me in English, "That is my pen." And the other girl had taken his pen, and I was like, I taught you a phrase. You said a whole sentence in English language. Right. So there are a few little moments like that, but I think overall for me and for many people, the most rewarding is kind of the relationships that you make out of it.
Yeah, and I often find instead of necessarily thinking in terms of best and worst, or you just kind of have this collection of stories, like a vast collection of stories that some are just stories and some have a point and other things. But the small town where I lived for that over 2 years, just a couple hundred people, and it was kind of a classic drop-off Peace Corps story. The director drove me out and kicked me out of the truck, and we had about an hour meeting with the whole village, which was a very intimidating affair with people making very passionate speeches that I couldn't understand, and then the director drove off, and I had no idea what was, my task that first day was to build my bed. I just had a set of boards that I came with. But that I was building a school building. The project was to build this elementary school, and so I had done a lot of construction kind of growing up because my dad was a builder, but I really had just finished my undergrad in philosophy and religious studies. So my primary identity was not a builder, so I was fairly confident I could read the blueprints and do this thing, but I wasn't primarily a builder. So that next morning when we kind of took a walk around the village to pick the school site, and there was one obvious kind of area that I just figured this will be where we built the school. It was this kind of flat, open area. It was kind of an informal soccer field, and so I was all ready to try to, my first job was going to be to convince people that's where we built the school. And they never even paused there. We went around to this other place in the village, which was essentially a hillside, and said, this is where the school will be. And so you kind of have a little mini panic, like, I don't know how to build on a hill, or it's going to be a lot of work to build on a hill. But you quickly, it unfolds, and you realize over time that this was actually a much more primary, kind of important kind of consideration. That this small village had two distinct ethnic groups that had only been living together for, maybe 50 years at the most. It was a post-colonial kind of, forced village arrangement, and there was historical tension and actual tension, and one group lived on one side of town and the other lived on the other side of town, and so the hillside they picked was on the center line, and culturally it was very, and politically very important that the school span both sides if we were going to have people from both groups working on it and kids from both groups going to school there. And this is stuff that you had no idea going into this, and tremendously challenging. But you have those little light bulbs where you realize, like, okay, this is way more important than like starting in a nice flat terrain. So yeah, we dug for about a month to chip into the hillside and pull.
What was the most difficult thing with teaching in another country, and how do you believe a teacher can prepare himself or herself to overcome these challenges?
I mean, I think there are kind of two sides to the challenge. There are the physical challenges of going into a classroom where you have no materials, you have no resources. How do you do group work when there's barely enough desks for students anyway? But that's something you can kind of get used to and prepare for. I think the hardest part really was the very different style of education they had. Students in Mauritania are used to call and response. Professor says something, you repeat it, professor writes it on the board, and you copy it down, and that's it. So I came in really thinking, in my idealistic kind of way, like, I'm going to totally change my classroom, and everyone's going to do group work, and it's going to be really interactive, and some of that worked and some of it didn't. You're up against, these kids when they get to a certain age, and especially if you want to kind of be at a university level, they've had years of a certain kind of education. So really finding a balance between what they're used to and what you want to do. So recognizing I can't do 12 activities because I cannot erase the chalkboard. It takes them so long to copy because most of them are barely literate that once it's up there, it needs to stay up there for the entire class or they won't get it. It takes a lot when you have students who speak so many different languages in your classroom. So I think the best advice I can kind of give about teaching style is to be as open as possible and really observe as much as possible what works with your students and what maybe you thought would be a great idea and just practically does not work out.
I think you will gain a better insight to yourself as a teacher. You're going to really learn maybe some new skills that you didn't know you have as a teacher, because you're going to be put in certain situations that you're going to have to be very flexible and adaptable to your teaching strategies and methods and how you approach teaching. So I think in that sense, getting involved in something like Peace Corps, you're really going to learn about yourself and be able to take that farther after Peace Corps. And I think a lot of people, as Joby said in the beginning, people have done that here, and you see some professors here now that were returned Peace Corps volunteers. I think going into Peace Corps will strengthen you as a teacher. You'll be able to really take what you learn, your experiences, and bring that back to the States with whatever you end up doing here.